Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Needless to say, I'm opposed to remaining in the European Union, and Brexit must not be stopped. A huge majority of my colleagues, 554 MPs, voted in favour of the EU referendum bill. 17.4 million people voted to leave the EU, and 494 MPs voted to trigger Article 50. And 60% of my constituency of Morley and outward voted to leave. There can be no doubt that the British people and their representatives in the House of Commons think that Brexit should go ahead. We made a promise, so now let's stick to that promise. The referendum question said nothing about the possibility that we should have a so-called people's vote. The referendum on the 23rd of June 2016 was the people's vote. It gave the British people the opportunity to finally have a say over our future relationship with the EU. And the people spoke, and we have to listen. The referendum question said, and I quote, should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? This language was approved by the Independent Electoral Commission, and the question was clear, and the people voted to leave the European Union by a sizable margin. The risk to the UK's trade after Brexit has been much exaggerated, much like how the immediate aftermath of our Leave vote was exaggerated by government and business. The British people were promised rapidly rising unemployment, an emergency budget, and untold horrors by those that supported Remain in 2016. The reality has been quite different. Sorry, I'll carry on. Thank you. The reality has been quite different. With a thriving economy, the fastest wage growth in a decade, record low unemployment and record high job vacancies, why on earth would they believe Project Fear 2 that has been rolled out by those who seek to undermine the will of the British people? No agreement with Europe will not mean an end to trade. This is a simply ridiculous argument, and in 1980 the EU's share of world GDP was around 30%. In 2017 it was around 16%, and by 2022 this is expected to fall further to 15%. The EU has a shrinking share, The EU has a shrinking share of world trade, and Brexiteers can see the benefits of trading freely, and the rest of the world, which is growing at a much faster rate than the EU. No, I'm going to carry on, thank you. You've got plenty of people on your side who you can give way to. Right. If we were to... Thank you.
For the record, there's nobody on my side. I stand
Chair,
alone and independent.
Of course. I apologise, Chair. Yeah. Thank you very much. If we were to go on to World Trade Organization rules, when we leave, then we would be trading under the same terms as the USA does already with us, and tariffs would average only around 3%. Some tariffs on exports will be higher. However, some goods are still exempt completely. The WTO has around 160 members, accounting for 90% of world trade. We will still trade regardless of, and if we leave the EU on WTO rules, or if we leave the EU on a trade agreement. We are the world's fifth largest economy. We are 1 in 5 of the permanent members on the UN Security Council, and we have the best universities in the world, and we have the most resourceful and amazing people. The UK will always succeed. I am not, thank you very much, and I'm confident that we will prosper. I'm carrying on, yeah. The biggest benefit to us leaving on WTO rules is our freedom to sign our own free trade deals with the rest of the world, like with the world's largest economy, the USA, and with the economic powerhouses of tomorrow, such as India. This has the added benefit of meaning... No, I won't, thank you. We would also keep the 39 billion...
Mr. Brake.
Sir Roger, could you give us some guidance? It would be really helpful in this debate if members were to know whether the Honourable Lady has written a letter to the chair of the 1922 committee calling on the Prime Minister to go. But she won't take any intervention. Can you help us, Sir Roger, try and determine the answer to that question?
I'm sure the whole chamber will be absolutely fascinated, but as the honourable gentleman is well aware, because he's been here a very long time, it is not a matter for the chair. Andrea Jenkyns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Right, let's see. We'll be in control of our own destiny, and we'll be able to deliver on the Prime Minister's promise to be a free trade champion and a true global Britain. unlike on the PM's current deal, if we go WTO. As a Conservative, I believe in the benefits of free trade, and I want to see a liberal free trade and with the rest of the continent as possible. But this cannot come at the expense of breaking the promise made to the British people at the referendum, or by my party or Her Majesty's opposition in our manifestos. Trust in Parliament and politicians is essential for a strong democracy. Across the West, we have seen a decline in levels of public trust in politicians and political institutions. The level of mistrust and scepticism has increased, and I have grave concerns that if we do not deliver, if Brexit is stopped, then the trust will erode further. In November 2017, Ipsos Mori undertook a poll of trust among professions. Public trust in politicians was only 17%. This is truly damning. To put this into context, nurses were trusted at 94, the ordinary man in the street was trusted at 64, bankers were 38, professional footballers were 26. We need to reverse this shocking trend, and stopping Brexit will certainly not do that. Quite the opposite. 70% of Conservative seats and 61% of Labour constituencies voted to leave the EU, and they will not trust us again if we remain in the European Union. It is also important to note that there is, and never was, an option to keep the status quo. The EU is a project which supports deeper integration, and it is not clear on what terms British membership would be. Even if the anti-democratic Stop Brexit campaign has got their way, would, for example, the UK remain an EU member state on its existing terms? With opt-ins, opt-outs, budget rebates, etc., if the UK were to remain, it has been suggested that we could end up paying more money to the EU budget. One of the pledges of the referendum was to take back control of our money. Those suggesting that Brexit should be stopped are essentially suggesting that we would be willing to pay more in and get less back. And I'd say good luck to selling that to your constituents. Our hard-fought rebate was a famous victory for Margaret Thatcher. Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair has already given away a large chunk of this rebate for nothing. To remain in the EU following the largest democratic decision in our nation's history is an outrage. To pay more into the EU's budget for the pleasure would be a catastrophe. Not everyone here today will agree if our relationship with the EU is positive or negative. However, what should we all be able to agree on is that we are knighted under our democratic ideals and our British principle of fair play. Referendums are extremely rare under our constitution, and even if they are not necessarily constitutionally binding, it would be unthinkable for the UK Parliament to overrule a referendum itself, and I sincerely hope this never happens, and I would always oppose it. I say this to the opposition parties opposite. If you had won the 2011 referendum on our voting system, or the 2014 referendum on Scotland's independence, how would you and your supporters have felt if Parliament had rejected or overturned your result? This is a situation this petition is supporting. It is wrong and it's simply un-British. I'm nearly finished now, thank you. We as politicians reap what we sow. If we ignore and discard the will of the people will quite rightly discard us. So SNP members are particularly keen to overturn the referendum result.
My apologies, Sir Roger. I just want to clarify how we can get on the record that everyone who sits this side of this chamber didn't necessarily agree with the indication of the vote that was given by the honourable member opposite.
Once again, as the honourable gentleman is well aware, that's not a point of order for the chair, but I think he's just achieved his objective. Andrea Jenkyns.
Thank you. SNP members are particularly keen to overturn the referendum result. I would suggest to them, be cautious about setting this dangerous precedent. Your sole purpose is independent for Scotland, not something I or for Scotland supports, but nevertheless, imagine this Parliament taking a yes vote and overturning it. It would simply be wrong. We are leaving the EU. That's what the British public voted for, and that is what we must deliver. If we don't, then more is at stake than simply keeping the status quo. We are eroding the trust in our democracy. Thank you.